Michelle Boyle is from Ireland, and I met her about a year ago on a Zoom meeting where we were introduced, and then she came and stayed with me in Pune, and I encouraged her to join the Water Museum Network, and here we are. So let me start. Michelle and I have kind of gone through the conversation, and she said a couple of very interesting things in the car coming over here, but I don't want to steal those from her about the relationship between artists and scientists. But Michelle, why don't we start a little bit with you talking about what really influenced you in your childhood as an artist, and what did you do? Where did you go? Did you professionally study art or not? So.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for coming, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I'm so grateful to Sara for the invitation, but I'm very grateful to people to come and to listen to us have this conversation. Thank you to all of you. And maybe if we go to the first slide, Radhika, is that okay? Yeah, how I became an artist or how I started. I'm a self-taught painter. My degrees are in cultural anthropology and history, and my master's in landscape architecture and archaeology. Although I could do those jobs, and I worked in that field of museum curatorship, art was always my passion. And from the age of about 8, my mother, who's this woman over here, and that's me as a little baby, holding me in the garden in Cedarwood Road in Dublin. So if anybody's a U2 supporter, you might know Bono from U2. He grew up on the same road as me. So he has actually got quite a famous song called Cedarwood Road, and it's about this road. So that's my mother, and that's me as a child, and these are my 3 sisters. And my love of art was really fostered by my mother from a very young age. And she used to give me the bus fare to go to the public drawing sessions in the Hugh Lane Gallery in Dublin when I was about 8 or 9 years of age. So I sort of look back at that now and say, would I give that bus fare to my child and let them on the bus? But she did. And she'd got a big idea of where you gain knowledge. And she herself hadn't gone, I think her education was up till the age of about 14. She came from rural Ireland. So she's got a great generosity and a great belief that if my daughter's interested in something, I'll support her. So these were free drawing classes, and they were aimed really at underprivileged children. So I went along, and we had big sheets of paper, and we put them on the floor, and we drew. And I was ecstatically happy doing that. So she was the first person who gave me the space to explore myself as an artist, and also the understanding that galleries and museums are public spaces for all of us to walk in, no matter who you are or where you come from. A public gallery and museum belongs to the people of the country. So I have a lot to be grateful to Mary Boyle for, and it's so nice to say her name here in India. These are my 3 sisters. My mother adopted 4 children. I'm the youngest of the adopted children. That's why none of us look alike. But she used to dress us all the same, which was, again, she had a sort of a wisdom that can't be taught or can't be learnt. She just was, I suppose, just decent and kind. I mean, they're underrated words, but that's what she was. So I have a lot to be grateful for to Mary Boyle, and she passed away a few years ago. So I miss her a lot.
It's interesting you bring up the influence of your mother in your life, because I was privileged to hear Jane Goodall speak in Bombay on Sunday at the finale of the Lit Fest. And she's in her early 90s, and I think all of you in the room know who Jane Goodall is. But she started her conversation by talking about the role of her mother and the support that she received from her mother, and how, as a young child, she took a fistful of earthworms into the bed with her. And her mother came to tuck her and, say goodnight. And she didn't scold her for having these earthworms in the bed, but she said that they belong outside in the soil. They need to go out, and this is a very nice way. And then Jane, of course, had more examples of her mother as she went through the conversation. But that's really interesting. And I'm wondering whether that's because we are daughters in a way that our mothers matter to us.
We are. And I think there's also then becoming a mother myself. I think what you do is, in a very poetic way, from a friend of mine who's a poet, said you move into the space that your mother has left. So I would like to think that I've moved into the space where my mother was, and that I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, and I would like to think that I give that space for my sons and daughters, my daughters and sons, that they're very equal in my eyes and they have the same opportunities in this world, and that and to live in a just society is really important for me, that you know, that's there, like my mother gave it to me, because she certainly didn't have those opportunities. She wasn't given those. Education wasn't something for girls, for women in Ireland back when she was a young woman. So her options were very limited. So yeah, I think maybe there's a lot to be said for that saying, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rocks the world. And I think it's not in any way lessening the role of men. It's just, I think an equal society is really important for us all. Yeah, and she was a pioneer of that, you know, she really was, in her own very quiet way of going about. I have a lot to be grateful to her for. So I'm half Indian, and I would have only realised that about 15 years ago when I actually started having my own children, and saying I must find out about where I came from before I was adopted. So I went on a quest for my own inheritance.
I was going to say that you found your roots in India, or your inheritance, and you came here for the first time in 2016, and you went down to Kerala.
Yeah,
I understand. Yeah.
And
so you started working with watercolors there. So
these are just, they're a little bit intense. They're a little bit saturated, the colors. That's just the way they're showing on the screen. But you can look at my website and you'll see these images. They're a little bit less intense than they are. I came to Kerala in 2016 to actually see how my work sat. So I began I'm painting for 20 years, and I wanted to see how my work sat with this new knowledge in an Indian environment, and also what way would I respond to this exceptionally rich visual inheritance that I didn't really feel was mine or anything. I was very much brought up in Ireland with a visual inheritance from there, but Ireland and India share a lot of commonalities. We were both colonial countries by the British, so we probably inherited that very academic way of painting, and that's how I would have been looking at that as well. So these are paintings, just to show you the type of paintings I was doing. This is a self-portrait, which would have been shortlisted or longlisted for the Portrait Awards in the Portrait Gallery in London, which is quite prestigious. And all of these small, well, it was big for me, but all of these small steps, as anybody who's an artist will know, that they give you faith to keep going on. They give you a sort of trust in your ability as a painter, because you're putting yourself out there. And this was a difficult painting to put out because it was about a friend of mine who was quite ill. The painting on this side is a mixture of sort of my birth mother, my birth father, me, my child. It's just sort of compressing time in together and putting people in the same image. So what I'm doing in this is I'm creating my own my own inheritance, and sort of taking ownership of who I am as a person. So this is a very large painting. It's like bigger than that stripy thing over there. It's a big painting, and it's currently up in Mumbai in a gallery called Nine Fish. So this
is your Kerala work.
There right? I am on the street. That's when I arrived. Of course, I had no idea. I came to Kerala and I wasn't going to bring my oil paints, so I brought watercolors. So I actually brought my watercolors to show you. So I brought, for painters. So that's what you bring. That's my watercolors. You can see them sort of there beside me. And, one or two brushes, like a brush like this, 1 or 2 brushes like that. And a sketchbook. So I brought in a sketchbook as well that you can look at. And I hadn't worked in watercolors before, and I certainly hadn't worked on the street in India, and I certainly wasn't prepared for the attention I was going to get sitting in the same place for a week. And so people on the first day, there was a crowd around me, and it was like, And I was saying to people, I'm half Indian. That was all I could say. And I could say namaste. And that's still probably the extent of my Hindi, which I have to work on. But after day 2, really, nobody really paid much attention to me. And then people started bringing me things and food and things, which was really lovely. And I felt, actually, so I really like it here. I really like, I really like how kind people are to me. And I felt very comfortable. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking across, and this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a washing line, and I'm looking at this woman, and I'm there all day, and I'm looking how often she's changing the clothes on the line. And I'm looking at women's work, and I think of my own mother and the clothesline, because it's one of these things that's all over the world. We hang our clothes out on the line, we wash, we hang them out, wash. It's like the biography of somebody's life to look at a washing line. So I have it at the bottom there, washing line, Kottayam, 2016.
This was in Kochi, right?
This was in Kottayam, a small village.
Kottayam. Yeah.
So that's it. So working in watercolors, this was my first time working in watercolors, and I really, really liked it. I really liked it as opposed to oils, which I find heavy. And I mean, I like oils, but watercolors were fast and they were easy. I mean, they flowed. It suited me. The lack of control suited me. The bloom, the fact that I didn't really pre-draw. I know there's artists here and then there's people who are non-artists, but just to say that, with watercolors, you can draw first and then you can paint over it, or the other way around. But I don't use pencils so I love the flow of the line, the color and the intensity, and the fact in India, these were drying really fast. So the watercolors were drying really fast, and I could just move on. I'm going to show you one that I like. This is from Ireland. Like, you can see the difference. Like, it's just, that might have taken an hour to dry, right. And and even you can see when I turn the page, the page is often stuck together because the watercolor was still wet. So, so these are just little watercolors. So these are some of the little watercolors that I did. Again, people walking along, some carrying water, just going about their daily work, and really at this stage not really taking much attention to the person sitting on the steps, which was really nice, actually. It was really nice. This was down in the backwaters, and a woman washing her clothes again. I think this thing of women bent to their work is
that's a
through
theme.
Time.
That's a theme we've looked at as well in Living Waters Museum, women and work and water, whether it's fetching water, carrying water, agriculture, irrigation, women's participation in water governance, for example. And I think that's a theme also that I've seen in many art galleries now, because I'm more perceptive about water and seeing, paintings of Dutch masters, of clothes hanging on a line, or women ironing clothes and things like that. And it just keeps coming up all the time. It keeps
coming up. Yeah, it keeps coming up. And it's interesting when you go to big cities, if you get the opportunity to go to a big city, you don't see the people's washing out. It almost reflects the way big cities, first world cities live, where the washing isn't out on the line anymore. It's not spread out side of the road. It's not, it's not hanging on the lines in the gardens.
Yeah. Well, in Rome it does. In Italy, clothes hang from the balconies of many homes and places and all that. So it's quite interesting. So
this one is actually, you're going to say the name of the hills for me.
Sahyadri Hills.
The Sahyadri Hills. The Sahyadri Hills.
Up to Pune.
This is half the painting. It's actually a much bigger. It's longer. I don't know why I have only a detail of it, but this was one I did during monsoon on paper from Pune, handmade paper. I don't know if anybody knows it. It's a really nice place, and they're all gorgeous there. And they have this wonderful paper. So I spent a while there last year making paper and had a small exhibition there of watercolors. But this is one of them, and I made it with the monsoon water. So it was the first time I'd actually used the water on location. So usually I'd bring water in a bottle with me from wherever, from the room I was staying in or whatever, from my own home. But this time I actually started using the water, and then I felt something was slowly switching in the way I was working, because the water was becoming part of the painting. The water was leaving its own mark. The place was leaving its own mark. And that started settling into my head that the water was as a very significant player.
Part of the work. And just to step back a little bit, like just looking at water in your art. And the other day we were in a conversation with an artist in Mexico, and it reminded me of another Indian artist, Hari something with a very long name, and they have used polluted water in their artwork. And we're trying to now, we've been thinking about another project. These were also colleagues from IHE in Delft, where the Aquamuse project is from. And we're thinking, is there a way of connecting artists who are working on water quality issues using that same dirty water from the Ganga or from whatever red river that was in Mexico? I can't remember where he was from now, but really fascinating work using that water. But I know then you now live in rural Ireland in a little town called Virginia, in County Cavan. Cavan. And water is very much a part of your work, which is why we're all also here this afternoon. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Cavan. I don't know. Can you just turn the next slide? So I think. Oh yeah, this is me working in the studio. I live in Cavan, which is, so if anybody knows Ireland or has been to Ireland, I'm from Dublin, and then if you start travelling north up to Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, I live quite close to the border with Northern Ireland. I live in the inside, so I'm surrounded. The county is very famous for its lakes. So it has 375 lakes, one for every day of the year. Is that what they're 375? Yeah.
365 days in the year.
I was trying to say how many days are in the year. One for every day of the year. And the one beside me is called Loch Ramor, and
that's the largest lake in the UK or something.
Oh no, that's Loch Ness. That was a separate lake we were talking about. Yeah. So the reason I put this picture up, that's me in the studio working on one of the big paintings. That's my studio, the one on the right, and I live in an old schoolhouse. So this was a schoolhouse that was built in the 1950s, and the outbuildings are the school sheds where children would have put their bicycles and that sort of thing. And part of the studio has a big water tower. So this tower is about 2 stories high. I'm actually taking this from a roof, so it's actually double this height, you see. And it's a real thing on the landscape. You know, you can see it from around. When we came first, the water, because the idea of this was that there was a reservoir for the children in the school, it would have had maybe 20 children in this little primary school, small children. They needed a reservoir of water. And when we came first, that reservoir was still working. So sometimes you put the pump on and the water, you would forget to turn the pump off, and you'd be in the house, and the next thing you'd hear this cascade, and the water would be coming right over the top of that, and it would be falling right down onto a galvanized tin roof. So you'd hear this absolute pounding of water coming down. And to see this water, which was coming from about 200 feet under the ground, it was coming from an underground stream, to see this water was like, gosh, you know, and to hear it and to have to go out and turn off the switch with the sound coming down on the roof. So my studio is that, to the left is that green wall where the steps are, and I have another small studio on the right, which is now, I've done up sort of, I mean, studios are working studios, they're not pretty places. It's a studio for a working artist, but I'm inviting artists to come and work there and spend time and to do residencies. So if anybody's interested, let me know. You can talk to me about that. But so water is very present when I work in the studio. That's where I'm standing is in that room to the left. And it's a big room. It's got no insulation. It's very cold in wintertime. And it's, so this is me working on one of my paintings of Loch Ramor, excuse me, the lake beside me. These incredible flag irises that come up in May, these incredible flowers that come up in the lake. And under COVID, like I was saying to you, under COVID.
That's what I was coming to next, because when the pandemic started, you moved outside into the landscape. And is there a slide we want to move to?
I moved out into the landscape, and what I started doing was using my sketchbook, but also working in a different way. So a couple of things started happening. I started swimming in the lake, which I've never really done before, and I'm not a really very good swimmer. So that's me there in the lake. And I bought I bought a small little camera in a supermarket, which was a really bad camera. But because it was really bad, and I haven't any pictures, I had a video, but I didn't upload it. Because it was really bad, it was really impressionistic because the quality was so poor. I'm sure the cameraman here would hate the things I was using because they were really bad. But so I would go under the water and video myself. But this is that camera. So it's a small little underwater camera. And I call this time epilimnium. And epilimnium is, lakes are stratified. It's not like the sea, which is all mixed. Lakes are stratified, so they actually have layers to them. And twice a year, the lake turns. It physically turns. So the cold water drops and the warm water rises. And the epilimnium is the surface layer. And when you start going into the lake, you start feeling the change of these layers. It's very subtle, but it does there. It happens twice a year. So I was going into the lake. I wasn't wearing a wetsuit. I was going into the lake, just going in and paddling. But then going in further, so swimming, going down under the water. And I think during COVID, when we had a 5 kilometre restriction on how much we could travel, the lake is 2.5 kilometres down the road from me. So the lake became like my sanctuary. It became the place for me to go to and to connect with nature and connect with myself, I suppose. And then I started noticing things like this and wondering what these things were, and what were these things?
That's your hand there.
That's my hand holding. These things would wrap around your legs at a certain time of year, and I was wondering what these things were. Yeah, so this is just going into the lake did two things. It made me start thinking about the way I was working, and I started working much bigger. So I was working on big paintings. This one is a big painting on silk, which was in Los Angeles. So that's just working very, very big. Again, these are going into an exhibition, all water. And I suppose what I was doing, Sarah, and I know we talked about this, is I was bringing visibility to something that I felt was really worth looking at for myself to learn and still learn, continuing to learn about it, but also looking at artists before, like you were saying about how they had drawn attention to water, and how if you represent something in art, people can sometimes give it a value that maybe they just hadn't really noticed before, and it sort of elevates things. I really believe that it elevates our perception of things. So I was making these, also making very small little watercolors, these big works. So it was a range of works, and started putting them out. But I was delighted that, like, from my own lake in Ireland, in Cavan, that these paintings then, went to California. They've come to India. That they started traveling and people seeing them. But most importantly, that local people started looking as well. And so this exhibition is in Virginia, in my local town. It's a gallery in a converted church, and we were just carrying the work in, and lots of people came, and it was like, well, this is our lake, and there was pride in the ownership of it.
Yeah, and that takes me to the questions that then, as an artist, swimming in the lake and immersing yourself in water, but then also using that as a means to start stimulating conversations around water and talking to the communities that lived around that lake, like the fishing community. Yes, but also I think raising questions about how we use water, how we talk to water, how we listen to our water.
Yeah, that's
and I think let's move the conversation. We can move on. We'll
move it on to that. So that's that one, and we'll go to the next one. Yeah. So this again is it's just my process. It's about it expanding and pushing out beyond. Still based very much in painting. Still very my sketchbooks and what I was seeing at the lake. Working with some fabric, seeing, well, how can I pull things in maybe to a 3D. So these are studio works. That work was in an exhibition, and that was a video installation of the lake. But so that's about process development, I suppose. But in the next slide, those questions that started coming up about the water itself, and engaging with other people. So one of the things that is, when you look at this, it's a beautiful river, and it's a gorgeous river in rural Ireland, but this river is poor quality. And there's nothing in it that you would look at. The river, the lake I swim in is poor quality. If you look at it, you don't see pollution. There's no pollution visible. But a lot of our waterways in Ireland are polluted, and they are polluted with things you can't see. So it's not like you're seeing trash or you're seeing sewage, or sometimes you do see sewage, but it's not like it's visible. So even though I go down and I swim, I'm conscious that the water I'm going into isn't bathing quality, or isn't, and people have got sick, and there is sometimes, drinking water. You can't drink the water from your taps because it's coming from the waterways. So what I'm doing here this is where I've started getting curious about the actual science of things and saying, well, and I think that science and art are very close to each other, because scientists and artists they ask questions about things. So this is a program that is run in Ireland and across Europe, and it's a water blitz program where you take samples of the water from your local river or lake, and then they're sent off for testing. Sorry, I'm wrong. You test them yourself with just a little litmus thing. You test them yourself for phosphates and nitrogen, and then they're fed into a map of all over Ireland of water quality. Right. So this is what I'm doing here, and this is just the report from 2022 of the national report of all the findings from the different people who went out.
Do these reports come out every year? Or?
Yeah, they come out from Dublin City University. Some of you may know it. That's that. It's called Citizen Science. If anybody's interested, they can look up the Citizen Science program.
You also wanted to talk a little bit about the work you did on water conversations.
Oh yeah. So in the next slide, oil. That's oil. Yeah. And that's an unstretched canvas, which, again, just asking about, like, gosh, when I'm going into the water, what else is in the water? I was a bit scared of the different fish, and this particular lake has a lot of pike, and pike can be very, very big, and
you're telling me that pike have teeth.
They have very big
was it pike or perch? Pike. Yeah.
Pike. Pike have very big teeth, and one of the fishermen brought me a tooth from a pike one time and said, "You'd be interested in this." And I was going, "Oh my God, I didn't realize the teeth were so big." Yeah. And and for him then to tell me for him to say under the water, it's a whole different world under the water, and the pike is very different. It's a very different type of fish. It's predatory. It hides. It's a very slow mover. It's a big fish. It hides behind a stone or deep in a crevice because it can't swim very fast. So it waits for its prey to pass. And I was like, gosh, I live so close to this place, and I just didn't know that all of this is happening, under the water. All of this is happening. So I did go out fishing. I did catch some fish. They all go back. This is going back into the water. It went back into the water. But that idea, of taking something out and looking and saying, I have never seen a live fish this close, and it has never seen a human being this close. And we're both terrified. We're both terrified, especially with the pike, because the pike was that size, it was big and it was hard to hold, and I don't have a picture of that. But in all of this, I was realizing what was happening was that there was people, and this is replicated. I'm not just obsessing about where I live, but I realize this is replicated in other places, that you have people interested in water, people interested in the fish, people interested in the ecosystem, and sometimes they're not talking to each other, and then there's the local community who have a different sort of a knowledge, and then you have the science community. So So last year I was given a small grant from the government to actually go out on the lake and actually talk to people about different ways they know water and different things. So one of these people is a psychologist, and he was talking about how he doesn't prescribe tablets to people with depression. He prescribes going to sit in the local greenhouse in the Botanic Gardens and sit there for an hour or two, or go out and sit by water in terms of mental health and well-being, So somebody else here was talking about how water is used in their religious practices. Just religion I didn't know at all, so we were talking about these things. So what this was just gathering knowledge, and it was lovely to do it out on the lake. Sort of, it wasn't a classroom. It was just sitting out on the lake, and we had brought sort of food to share, and it was actually lovely. It was a really nice day out. So we had about 4 of these conversations. And
you were just talking about faith and water, Michelle, and do you want to also use that to talk a little bit about the water divining?
So we have this, and it's actually quite common.
Where are your sticks?
I have them here, yeah. That water tower I was showing you from my old school, that water source was divined by a diviner. So he went with the sticks, the local, and usually it's willow. But you can use apple trees or hazel or that, but it's either a Y-shaped stick or it's 2 sticks like you were talking about. And the idea is that water has an energy, and water under the ground has an energy, and that animals sense it, and that we have lost in some ways that knowledge of how to, and the stick is just an extension of your own sensation. So I'm really curious about this, probably because I did archaeology, and I'm just very curious about this because it's a very old practice. And so I brought my divining rods. So
look for water on the campus.
I go and find water on the campus. So these are divining rods that were given to me by a diviner in Ireland. And the idea is you hold them quite loosely. Now, not like tight. You hold them quite loosely. And again, it's about visibility of water. And you ask the divining rods, is it okay to use them, first of all? And then you would ask them, and then you would ask, is it okay to start divining? And then you would ask what a yes or a no is. So the divining rods can only give you yes or no answers. So with this, the diviner walks across the landscape, and I'm just going to make this up as I'm talking to you. So the diviner walks, and he will say, so for me, example, a yes is like that, and a no is like this. So they walk across the landscape, and they ask when they cross water. So you walk along, and then the rods cross like this. And then you ask, how deep is the water? So you go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, you go up until you come to it crosses, and that's a yes. And then you ask, is this enough of a source of drinking water? And again, you ask sort of questions like for yes and no answers. This is still practiced in Ireland, and it's still used by the county council. The county councils still use water diviners. Generally practiced by men, but I am going to break that mold. I want to be the first woman water diviner. I really find it interesting because I think that it sort of exists somewhere between performance art, sort of quasi-religious belief, because you have to have faith in this, and science, because the science world does take it seriously as well, to some extent. People use them like there's meridians in the landscape, like there's, if anybody does, what do you call it? Sorry? Yes, the chakras. The chakras, it's a similar thing, like energies in the landscape. So you're just going out beyond yourself.
I have a little diviner story as well, which is that last year the Lithuanian ambassador to India, she's a friend, and we went to a village in Ahmednagar, which is a very drought-prone area, and we were tracing the life and the history of priest from Lithuania who had lived 60 years in, this village, and is died over there and is buried over there. And so we were meeting with people from the church and all. But it turned out that he was a diviner.
Wow.
And there were so many people from the community who came to talk to us and tell us, which is what we wanted to learn, his stories, right? And many of them talked about the wells, which he had identified for them, where they had dug the wells. And those wells still had water compared to other parts of the region which were dry. But the Indian priesthood over there did not want us to talk about him as a diviner, because it goes against the church and what the church believes in. Yeah. So you're saying that in Ireland, which I think is a Catholic country, and the church allows diviners to...
Well, Ireland has a very sort of healthy respect for homegrown religious belief systems. So divining is fine. The church probably did try to outlaw it or said whatever, but people sort of went on doing it. And certainly, like you're saying, that man on my road and in my area, there were a couple of diviners, and they would have divined a lot of wells that people still use for drinking water. And they would have been held in quite high regard. Yeah. Diviners were held in quite high regard in the community.
He used to just walk. He didn't have the sticks, but he had keys.
Oh, right.
And the keys would jingle and jiggle, and then they would know where the water was.
Yeah.
Something of that sort is what they described.
From the conversations at my local lake, I sort of put out a call through friends and that for people around Ireland. So Ireland is a very small island off England, so we've a population of 6.5 million or something. But I put so lots of people, word of mouth is still very possible to get information out. But I did ask people, would they send me stories about their own water body and their connection to it. So really what I was trying to get was different responses from different people. So the contributions are from fishermen, from scientists, from local people who swim in the water, people who just live beside water, or people who walk past water on their day to work. And there's some lovely stories in it. I've uploaded these onto my website, so you can click into Water Conversations. And I called it If Water Could Speak, What Would It Say to Us? So can I read one of them? I'll just read one of them, It started really with, my husband is from a small farm in Cavan. That's why I ended up down in Cavan. And the lake that's on his land is called the Dumb Lake, in other words, or the Dumb Loch. In other words, the lake that can't speak. And I thought that this name was really sort of a metaphor for water, that it's water not being able to speak for itself, and that we need to be able to, or I need through my work in some way find voice for this. So what I asked people to do was to send me a small paragraph on their local waterway, and send me a photograph of it, and then send me the actual water. So I had little bottles that I'd collected, and I sent these to people, and then they sent the waters back through the post, which is probably illegal, I'm sure, to send. I think it is actually to send water through the post. But anyway, they came back to me, and they're all of these little bottles are in my studio in that place. You saw they're all in my studio on a shelf, and they're all different colours, and they're all there's water from bogs, there's holy water from holy wells, there's waters from Dublin rivers, canals, and all of that. But yes, it came from the Dumb Loch. But I'll just read one because I think this one is lovely, and this is from somebody who's looked after a river for 40 years, and he works with the local council, and he's also a fisherman, so he knows the water. He knows the water well. But I think this could be said about a lot of waterways in India or anywhere else in the world. His name is Declan Feeney. When I look away from the river, I cannot help but see the daily struggle that this river must overcome to remain the custodian for the salmonoids and indeed the multitude of species which depend on this river for life. Sometimes it gives me the feeling of being tired from this constant battle. The heavily afforested sections of riverbank and hinterland change the landscape, and as a result diminish the quality of water entering the system by the network of drains, springs and small streams. The wastewater treatment plants which adorn the system are prone to breakdowns under pressure from the expanded villages, another burden this river must deal with. Large-scale industries developing the infrastructure to cater for these, along with intense farming practices, all impact on this fragile ecosystem. Over the years, I have realised that human interaction is usually detrimental to our waterways. The time has come for us all to play our part in changing these interactions to positive ones. The riverbanks are straining under these pressures, but have not yet been breached. If you listen closely, you might just hear these rivers asking for our help. Yeah, and that was 40 years working on a river, so he really has a deep knowledge and his despair. But I find that these people remain hopeful, in the work they do, in the science. The scientists are hopeful. The creative people, I think, in general, are hopeful because you put out work into the world, into the future, so it's really. I'll just read one other one because I really like this one. This is a different river. This is the Liffey. If anybody knows Dublin, this is our main river, and Dublin is where it is because of the Liffey. So this is Idelle Riley, and she has written just this little sentence. It's extracted out of a longer piece. I have walked by the river, by its side, finding joy in its beauty. I have rowed on its waters all the way to the port. The love I have for the Liffey knows no bounds. I just think that's beautiful.
But I know, Michelle, also, and maybe that can come up in the Q&A, but, from the local, from your lake, from your habitation, you've also started scaling your work out and reaching out to people in India, but also other parts of the world to, and that's how you're part of the Water Museum network as well. And I think that's important in terms of where you're going next, right?
Yeah, well, I think on those little cards that I passed around, if anybody doesn't have one, I have them. I have more here. It's that thing of, you can really see the connections. You can really see global connections in the local. So it goes beyond the local. I mean, I think that's the job of. I feel it's the job of the artist is to find those connections. And I think water, by its nature, it's connectivity. So that conference in Wamunet, the same issues come up for different waterways in different places, from China to America to Italy. It's the same. And I know when we look at those images and photographs that I've been showing, and you mentioned it in the car, like, is it like a privilege for me to go into the water, into the lake and swim in it? And it is. I'm conscious that it is. I walk down Marine Drive. I'd love to get into the sea, but I feel I don't know the water. And but what maybe I can go in. Maybe it's fine to go in, but it just doesn't look like it's fine. But then the water I go into at home may not be fine sometimes, but I get in. So I think for me, having worked through my own sort of personal history and resolved that through my art, I think that it's just very important for me to give visibility to what I see as something which I really love. And it's a strange word to describe for water, but I really do love water, and I actually despair. I go down to the lake in the morning, at 8 o'clock before I go to work in the studio, and I go into the water and I come out, and it's really, really cold, and I come out. But might go to the supermarket afterwards, and I see rows and rows and rows of cleaning products for water, and then I see rows and rows and rows of plastic bottles of water, and I actually really, personally, emotionally despair. And I said, what? So I've tried in my own household to get my sons, in particular, and daughters to not spend so long in the shower, to not be using stuff that's harsh to the water, not to be using cleaning products, not to, just to be more mindful of the water, And
that's a good place to stop at. And
Yeah.
thank you, Michelle, for the conversation so far.
You're
We're
welcome.
not formally thanking you right now, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.